Okay, so we're 3 minutes past, guys. I'm going to dive right in, and what I'll do is I'll just let people in while we go. So for the first half hour, I'm just going to sort of share a little bit of the magic of like what Metatron is all about. Um, but before I dive into the specifics of the shape, right, I just want to give everyone a reminder about like this is a meditation experience, and I have some very simple graphics that I'd love to share. I'm going to just set myself up here in Spotlight. I hope you don't mind me getting a bit bigger there, but and I'll go full screen here. Okay, I'm just trying to keep an eye on participants. I won't go full screen yet. Sorry, guys. It's a little bit of organization when you're managing Zoom on your own as well. I just want to make sure as people arrive, I let them in essentially. Um, okay, so essentially, like the most important slides I'm going to share are these two slides on what we actually are doing here, okay? And so essentially, like the meditation is just this invitation for you to take a little bit of like time and give yourself a little bit of space and permission to allow yourself open to kind of the deeper dimensions of who you are. And so what I mean by that is, all of this work that I'm offering is essentially based on a really simple principle. It's the principle that the person who knows what's best for you is you. Okay. And so I'm this huge believer in this principle of the inner healer, that we all have this kind of innate wisdom within us. And so Jeff certainly doesn't have the answers for you. So my invitation here this evening, and basically in everything I do, is to try and create spaces where we can together enjoy a journey where we support each other, open to the wisdom within ourselves. Okay. And so a very big influence for me and my core teacher and mentor has been Stan Groff. And I've adopted his cartography of the psyche essentially into everything that I do. And so, without laboring the point, it's easy to see on this slide here that there's basically like broad categories of consciousness that we are all abiding in all the time. And so this is a very simplified version of the cartography. There's a lot more in Stan's model, particularly around the birth and perinatal. But for our purposes tonight, this type of three-tiered or conscious rush hour state of consciousness, day-to-day busy self is the tip of the iceberg there. And then resting above this kind of busy self is our personal unconscious. So I kind of relate to the personal unconscious as simply everything that's happened to you since the day you were born. Everything that's happened for the good, everything that's happened for the bad. There's kind of like a residual imprint that we all carry with us. And then deeper down, we also have this collective unconscious where we can tap into kind of the information that binds the universe together. And it's here is where the archetypes reside. And amongst these archetypes is geometry and number. And this is what I'm most passionate about, is that we all have access to this kind of eternal knowledge. And these shapes and these numbers and these diagrams encode information that are directly from the collective unconscious. And so our exercises couldn't be simpler. As we gaze at the mandala, we'll take a few breaths. I make it really easy to do. Um, all we're doing is kind of opening a valve, if you like, from this kind of busy day-to-day self, which many of us, myself included, are stuck in for an inordinate amount of time. And it can be very liberating, very healing, very freeing to just allow the contents of the unconscious rise up into the light of our awareness. Okay, so that's all we're doing. So if I get carried away with Metatron and the details of geometry, I just want you to remember those two slides. Everything we're doing is essentially honoring the fact that all of us have an innate wisdom within ourselves. Okay, and that innate wisdom is available to us at all times, but it becomes a little bit more accessible to us when we actually just give ourselves a little bit of time, space, and permission to do something like what we're going to do tonight. Okay. All right. So tonight's shape is Metatron's cube, and Metatron's cube is like one of my all-time favorites. You know, it's like it's in my top of the pops of geometric archetypes. For some reason, this shape has been a guiding principle in all of the workshops I've done here in the early days. I have hosted sand mandala workshops with many participants, and sacred geometry was this kind of mandala that I shared with the group. I would say more than any other actually. And I sometimes did like very large scale group mandalas in groups of 20 people. Other times people would create their own personal mandala based on this shape. And it's an unbelievably powerful shape actually. You know, it's encoded with like profound truth, and it goes very deep. I think even when I started working with it, I wasn't 100% certain about like everything that is encoded in it, to be honest, you know. Um, so let's have a look at it. Where are we here? So here is the shape itself, and it's a simple diagram in many respects. But there's a number of qualities of Metatron that I'd like to share with you before we meditate with it, okay? And there's two key principles of polarity that I'd like to share. This dance between the circle and the line, okay? So you'll see there in the kind of foundational layer, these kind of like dark circles, these black circles, and in the background, there's 13 circles in total. So there's six around, one in the center, and then kind of six satellite circles. All right. Can everybody see that, what I'm talking about, those 13 circles? It's like it's just the base layer of Metatron. Okay, now how do we get this reasonably looking complex shape? Well, we simply just join the centers of every circle to every other circle in the diagram. So it's actually really easy to draw Metatron's cube. Once you draw down that foundational layer of the 13 circles, you simply just join the centers of all the circles, and then this magical shape pops out, okay? Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is in geometry, there's this, and in life in general, and in all of the work we're doing on ourselves, there's this kind of um, dance between two poles oftentimes. You know, there's like they call it duality. So you know, out of one comes two, and two is a duality, which is usually like it has an A and a B pole, and they can be in tension, they can be like oppositional at times. um but what's beautiful about geometry is like out of this polarity, out of this tension, a third thing arises. And so Metatron's cube really expresses this beautifully, because you have these two interacting poles, you have these circles, okay? And then you have this line, this definite line that joins each center point to each circle. Now, the line has a beginning and an end. It's very definite. It's actually very linear, you know? And the circle, by contrast, is very elusive. It's mysterious. A circle is a shape that essentially is an infinite number of points equidistant from the center, okay? And it's bound by this transcendental number pi, which is the relationship of the diameter to the circumference. And with pi, there's something missing, there's something elusive. And so the circle always has this alluring sense of something being not quite attainable. We can't grasp it. It lacks certainty. It's elusive, mysterious, kind of divine, heavenly almost, you know? It represents those types of archetypes where the line or the square itself, it is the opposite essentially. It's very definite. It goes from A to B, it goes in one direction, it's very clear cut. So some people kind of relate feminine attributes to the circle, masculine attributes to the line. And so I don't get too fixed on those particular definitions, but I hope you're getting the sense of this polarity, okay? This polarity. And it's in this tension between the circle and the line that Metatron gets born. Okay, this beautiful shape. So it's kind of it's an extraordinary shape actually, and there's a number of attributes that I'd like to share with you. So the first one is polarity and how it gives birth to a third form. I'll just say that again. So the dance between the circles and the lines give birth to the form that is Metatron itself. And so that's a significant quality of the shape we're working with tonight. Um, okay, now moving on, and interestingly, there is this wonderful attribute of Metatron where it also happens to be a birthplace of. Am I here? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I need to go back against my slides here, guys. Okay. Um, right. So this shape, Metatron, right, is a birthplace for the Platonic solids. Now, for those of you who are new to geometry and these terms are like, a little bit lofty, please don't worry about it, because when we get to the meditation, it's so simple and it's so easy to do. And I actually have a little reminder that you really don't need to understand any of this, right? You only need to receive the shape, and it's easy to do because all of the information is encoded in the shape. All of this information is already encoded in you. So the meditation is a joyful exercise that's easy to do. But just because we're here tonight, and you've all been so gracious to accept my invitation, I did want to share what it is that makes these shapes so meaningful for me. So you have these things called the five Platonic solids, and they're generally referred to as the building blocks of the universe. Um, and what Metatron does is it gives birth to these three-dimensional shapes. They're very straightforward shapes. The easiest one to actually acknowledge is the cube. Everybody understands what a cube is. It's like a dice you can hold in the palm of your hand. So the cube is, I'll actually show you the cube here. So out of the cardinal points, out of the nodal points in Metatron's cube, it gives birth to these three-dimensional shapes. But these three-dimensional shapes are very special because they're the most efficient way to encapsulate three-dimensional space. So these shapes, they're like regular polyhedra, meaning they have the same faces, the same edge lengths, and the same angles on their faces. And so these are the five most efficient ways for us to actually capture three-dimensional space. So out of this kind of two-dimensional diagram comes these two-dimensional forms. This is kind of important because if you can get this idea of like a square is simply a two-dimensional shape, where the cube is its three-dimensional analog. And what's lovely about Metatron's cube, and I'm going to show you this before we meditate, is it takes another step into the fourth dimension, and it shows us this kind of shadow of a fourth dimensional shape. So this kind of like stepping through dimensions is one of the attributes of Metatron that I really adore and revere actually. All right, so I showed you the cube there. This is the tetrahedron. Okay, it's a this is one of the most efficient shapes. It's an absolutely divine shape that inspires me beyond belief. The tetrahedron. It's a simple equilateral triangle with four sides on it, and I'll share a little bit more about the magic of the tetrahedron in a bit. We've got the cube. We've got the octahedron, which is essentially two counterpositioned four-sided pyramids with a square base, just like the Great Pyramid at Giza. We've got the icosahedron, and we've got the dodecahedron. So I'm flying through these a little bit quickly, okay? But one of the things I wanted to share with you is these five shapes are all given kind of an earthly element. So earth, air, fire, water. So the tetrahedron represents fire. The tetrahedron represents fire. The cube represents earth. The octahedron represents air. The icosahedron represents water. And the dodecahedron represents ether. Okay? And these are kind of like Platonic ideas, essentially, hailing from Pythagoras as well. And so there's a really cool coincidence when you add up the angles on the faces of these Platonic solids. If you add up the four earthly elements, earth, air, fire, and water, what I mean by that is you simply just add up on a square, there's four 90-degree angles on a square. So on a cube, you have like six of those faces. You add up all the angles and all of the corners on a cube, and you get 2,160 degrees. Okay? I hope that makes sense. But if you just do that for each of the earth, air, fire, and water, you actually get this number 7,920, which is the diameter of the earth in miles. Okay? So the four earthly elements, when you add up the total number of degrees on these shapes, coincidentally add up to the diameter of the planet we live on in miles. So there's these lovely overlaps, between like systems of measurement and geometry. Now, it's an not as well known, but it's a super cool addition to this, is that if you add up the two ethereal or the less material of the Platonic solids, being the dodecahedron representing ether and the octahedron representing air, you actually, lo and behold, get that same number, 7,920. Okay? And it's the diameter of the earth in miles. So what's going on here? Well, for me, like a lot of these interpretations are sort of like poetic, spiritual invitations to sort of like use geometry as a metaphor to understand life, okay? And with this dance between the ethereal aspects of the solids and the earthly aspects of the solids, both pointing to the same number, which corresponds to the diameter of the only planet we've ever existed on, this planet, or at least in this lifetime, I take away from that there is this capacity in all of us to have two different attributes of being. One being very much on the ground, very earthed, in the world, of the world, know your zip code, pay your taxes, get your kids to school on time. That's being of the earth. And then there's a more kind of like open, ethereal, mysterious, kind of more difficult to grasp with certainty side of our being here. And for me, that's the spiritual. That's the desire to know God. That's the opening to the mystery of it all. And so the dodecahedron and the octahedron, then they bring me into those spaces, almost just through like a very gentle application of my imagination. I'll enjoy those shapes in terms of their capacity to invite me to have a foot in both worlds, essentially. That's what these Platonic solids are doing. And they all come out of Metatron's cube. It's kind of rich, isn't it? Okay. All right, so I was just speaking there about these two different modes of being in the world, and I really love this guy Ian McGilchrist, who wrote an amazing book called The Master and His Emissary, which I couldn't recommend more highly. But I just want to share one component of that book that really struck me, where he speaks about attention. And he says the kind of attention we bring to bear on the world changes the nature of the world we attend to. Attention changes what kind of things come into being for us and in that way it changes the world. So different aspects of the world come into being through the interaction of our brains with whatever it is that exists apart from ourselves. And precisely which aspects come into being depends on the nature of our attention. So I really see Metatron's cube here as a really helpful ally in enabling us to have different modes of attending. So often in my life, I end up like being very fixed to the concrete world. And I actually find it very, very helpful to open my mind through geometry to this realization that very often I don't see the world as it is, but like I see the world as I am, you know? And so, one of the sort of simple exercises I really enjoy sharing with people is this simple, it's called a Necker cube. It's just a simple cube. And so, what I'd like to invite everybody to do, if you're willing, is to gently gaze at this cube, okay? Without forcing anything. But what can happen is you can begin to see the shape morph and change its orientation. So you may start looking at it, and it might look like a cube that's kind of pointing downward to the left, or it might be a cube that's pointing upward to the right. And it's just kind of one of these kind of cool optical illusions. But if you just gently gaze at it, you might be able to see, oh, wait a minute, is that pointing up or is it actually pointing down? And just gently keeping your gaze on it, it'll change and morph. Is anybody experiencing that, or am I coming across like a madman onto my own? It's okay. A couple of people are getting that vibe because you see, this is a really lovely elementary way to share how geometry interacts with our consciousness. You see, so as you see the shape itself, without you doing anything, it begins to impress itself upon your consciousness, kind of caressing consciousness in a way. And so this is just a very elementary shape, the Necker cube. So when we gaze at Metatron's cube, there's a lot more in it. So, okay, just to conclude then, I wanted to bring you to this third attribute of Metatron. So we've spoken about polarity, and we've spoken about like the manifestation of a third form. We've spoken about the Platonic solids and the dual nature of being in the world, both earthly and heavenly. And now we're going to lean into the sort of the dimensional shift that Metatron's cube affords us. So we have uh, I spoke about there a square to a cube, which we can all understand. But there's kind of two three-dimensional cubes in Metatron. I brought this image here because I think it's easier to see. There's a little smaller grey cube around a central circle. And if you look closely, hopefully you can begin to see a cube within a cube. A cube within a cube is what's happening there. Can anybody see that? A cube within a cube? Yeah? Yeah? Great. Okay. Um, Now, so what's really special about Metatron is that this cube within a cube is synonymous with like a fourth dimensional shape called a tesseract. And so we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole this evening, but it is an important quality of Metatron that it is an invitation for us to open to forms that exist in the fourth dimension. And so geometry is wonderful because we can go to many dimensions actually, but Metatron specifically invites us to the fourth dimension. And because we're three-dimensional beings, we live in the third dimension, right? We're just like basically height, width, and depth. And so is everything in our world. So with our three-dimensional brains, it's actually quite difficult for us to consider what is a tesseract. It's a cube within a cube, which is bound by motion. And even I struggle. Like I can say the words, but I can't really get my head around what a tesseract is. But in expanded states of consciousness, these principles can visit you, and you can almost experience yourself as these principles, and teaching comes through in a different way. And so I've had this happen to me over and over again. And so it's a wonderful kind of reassuring feeling to be graced by like forms from higher places. It's an exhilarating feeling actually. And it's one of the reasons I love Metatron so much is this ability to walk through dimensions is what it offers us. Okay. And so this idea of like a cube within a cube and that the same principles recur at every scale is this beautiful resonance with the Hermetic principle. I love these seven Hermetic principles. And this idea of like as above, so below is reflected so often in geometry, to be honest. Right. So, yeah, there are a few of like my own personal takes on the qualities of Metatron that I really enjoy. I get very wrapped up into geometry, and Metatron has a huge amount of sort of like history and sort of philosophical components to it as well. And so, like a lot of the geometric shapes, they're more kind of esoteric and hard to work out where they come from. Things like the Enneagram, which I absolutely adore. I'm going to definitely do another get together like this on the Enneagram. Um, but that was a guy, allegedly Gurdjieff, 100 years ago. Discovered this ancient community that had this sacred glyph, but it gets very foggy very quickly. About where the origins of these geometric forms come from, right? But what's gorgeous about Metatron is like it goes all the way back to the primary pattern, which is the flower of life. You have the seed of life, which is a very elementary form of the flower of life. Then you have the flower of life, and Metatron's cube is born out of the flower of life. It's called the fruit of life. And then this shape shows up in like very established traditional systems of thought. Like it's completely maps on perfectly to the tree of life in the Kabbalistic tradition. Like it's literally like Metatron's cube that sits into the top of that perfectly. Um, so and it's in the Masonic tradition as well. There's this whole take. I have written a little story on the philosophy behind it. There's this idea that like in the book of Enoch. Enoch was a man and he was taken by God to heaven, and then he was transformed into this angel. And the angel he was transformed into was Metatron, and he was like the keeper of the secrets of creation. And then Enoch, when he was a man on earth, basically what he was given a message from the gods to hide the ineffable name of God in a cube, and then pack it down 7 layers deep in the earth, or 9 layers deep in the earth, so that at a time when humanity was ready for the truth to be revealed, that the secret codes were there, they were ready. And so like all of these are allegories to me. I don't really get into the some dude Enoch burying something in the ground. It's more like, inside all of us is our own golden Metatron's cube. And then when we do the work on ourselves, we sort of like we plow the field, we do the fertile work of our souls, and then we become ready for truth to emerge in ourselves. So that's really what these shapes are about. Okay, I'm half an hour in, guys, and if it's let me I might just unspotlight myself to see if I can see some people. um Let me see. Hey, cool. Some cameras on. Always nice to see. Jennifer, how you doing? I just had a workshop in America with Jennifer there. Great to see you. You know, hey Stephanie, Larissa, Ansela, great to see you. Max, Jesse, good to see you. How's it going? And Veronica, and then all these lovely people here. I can see some people don't have cameras on. That's totally fine. I'm so happy you're here. Um, okay, so my proposal now, guys, is I wrote this little story based on just a sort of, it's like my little poetic take on Metatron to get us into the vibe for the meditation. When we do the meditation, like I'm going to make it so simple. It's just like the shape itself has everything you need. There's nothing I can say that will add anything to it. And so all you need to do is like gaze upon the shape. I'll sort of gently guide us through a couple of steps for this active phase, and there'll be some nice music, and the shape will sort of like cascade and morph in and out of manifestation, and then it will hit a kind of a crescendo point. And just to say, if anybody is sensitive to light, it does break into white light just momentarily for a few seconds. And it's a big part of it because Metatron essentially for me is like the moving into the light, and it's Easter Sunday, and so this is about the resurrection, and to me that's about the resurrection of the sun and the light. So it's a kind of a perfect meditation to share with you with all the symbology that's in the atmosphere today, you know. Um, so yeah, I was going to just maybe bring up the image, share with you a little thing I've written today, and then we'll dive right into the meditation. Does that sound okay? Okay, right on. Metatron, a journey from earth to the divine. In the ancient scriptures, Enoch was a man of profound faith who walked with God on earth, embodying certainty and connection to the earthly realm. His story is one of transformation. Taken by God, he ascends to become Metatron, the celestial scribe and guardian of divine wisdom. This transformation from Enoch to Metatron mirrors the interplay between the finite and the infinite. In the sacred geometry of Metatron's cube, this relationship is beautifully symbolized. The straight lines joining center to center represent the earthly, the definite, our tangible existence, much like Enoch's role on earth. They are the pathways of certainty, the known, the structured. Beneath this lattice, the circles embody the divine. They represent the elusive, the infinite nature of the higher realms, where the circumference and the diameter are incommensurate, reflecting divine mysteries that cannot be fully grasped. Metatron's cube is more than a symbol. It's a doorway, a portal that opens to these deeper dimensions. It invites us to step beyond the visible, connecting us to the archetypal frequencies where the essence of Metatron's wisdom resides. This ancient legacy, reflected in biblical and Masonic traditions, serves as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, offering us a glimpse into the infinite possibilities beyond our finite understanding. In this way, Metatron's cube becomes not just a shape, but a key to unlocking the hidden realms of the divine. In the sacred geometry of Metatron's cube, a profound journey unfolds, one that bridges dimensions and transcends the limits of our understanding. The diagram, at first glance, is a simple two-dimensional drawing, lines connecting points with precision and certainty. Yet, hidden within this simplicity lies a key to deeper realms. As we explore further, Metatron's cube reveals itself as a birthplace of three-dimensional forms, the Platonic Solids. These shapes, the most efficient ways of enclosing space, emerge from the cube, symbolizing the tangible reality we live in. But the journey doesn't stop there. Metatron's cube also hints at the fourth dimension, serving as a shadow of the Tesseract. Though our three-dimensional minds may struggle to fully grasp this higher dimension, the cube becomes a portal, a gateway to understanding the unseen. It reflects the higher intelligence, guiding us ever upward toward the divine. Metatron's cube, then, is not just a shape but a talisman, a tool that supports our transition between dimensions, constantly pointing us to the higher realms. It invites us to explore beyond the visible, to connect with the infinite possibilities that lie just beyond our reach, making the unseen seen and the impossible possible. This ancient symbol, rooted in timeless traditions, becomes a living bridge between the finite and the infinite, inviting us to journey through the dimensions and discover the divine mysteries that await.